Hi everyone, this is Refresh, and I'm here to bring you a battle between the two Hour of Devastation Planeswalkers deck. We have Nissa over here and Nicol Bolas over there. We'll be playing the best of three, and we will begin with a roll of the die to see who goes first. Nissa gets 7.
Nicol Bolas gets 6.
Nissa will opt to be on the play. We'll draw 7. We have 5 lands, but 2 decent spells and a chance of drawing into better things, so we will go ahead and keep this hand.
Nicol Bolas draws 7. We have 2 lands, 2 spells that we can cast, and I think that this is probably still good enough to try, so we'll go ahead and keep this hand.
Nissa plays a Woodland Stream tapped, and Nissa passes turn.
Nicol Bolas draws. Nicol Bolas plays a swamp, and Nicol Bolas passes turn.
Nissa untaps, Nissa draws. Nissa plays an island. Nissa taps the Woodland Stream for green and the island, and plays a Feral Prowler, and Nissa passes turn.
Nicol Bolas draws. Nicol Bolas plays a mountain. Nicol Bolas taps the swamp and the mountain, and plays Wasp of the Bitter End, and Nicol Bolas passes turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa plays a forest, and Nissa attacks with the Feral Prowler for 1. Nicol Bolas declines to block, takes 1, going to 19. Nissa passes turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws. Nicol Bolas plays an island. Nicol Bolas will attack with the Wasp of the Bitter End.
Nissa cannot block, will take 2 and go to 18.
Nicol Bolas taps 2 and plays Throne of the God Pharaoh. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. We are at Nicol Bolas' end step, and Nissa will lose 1 life for 1 tapped creature.
Nissa goes to 17.
And Nicol Bolas passes turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa plays a forest. Nissa attacks with the Feral Prowler. Nicol Bolas declines to block, will take 1 and go to 18. Nissa passes turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws. Draws a Cinder Barrens. Nicol Bolas will play a swamp. Nicol Bolas will attack with Wasp of the Bitter End. In response to attacks declared, Nissa will tap everything, tapping the Woodland Stream for blue, and play an Aven Reedstalker with Flash. Nissa will block the Wasp of the Bitter End with the Aven Reedstalker. Nicol Bolas has no response. The Wasp of the Bitter End will die. This will end Nicol Bolas' attack phase, and Nicol Bolas will, in the second main phase, tap everything and cast Zealot of the God Pharaoh. And Nicol Bolas will end turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa plays a Woodland Stream. Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a Magma Spray. Nicol Bolas will play a Cinder Baron tapped. Nicol Bolas will attack with the Zealot of the God Pharaoh. Nissa will double block with the Feral Prowler and the Aven Reedstalker. Nicol Bolas will assign damage to the Aven Reedstalker first, and will deal 3 damage to the Aven Reedstalker and 1 damage to the Feral Prowler. The Zealot of the God Pharaoh will take 3 damage from them and also perish. Nissa loses the Aven Reedstalker. In the second main, Nicol Bolas will tap red and cast Magma Spray on the Feral Prowler. Magma Spray deals 2 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile instead. Nissa will tap an island and cast Unsummon on the Feral Prowler, returning to Nissa's hand. Magma Spray misses, and Nicol Bolas will end his turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a force. Nissa plays an island. Nissa will play the Feral Prowler again, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a Kenra Eternal. Nicol Bolas will tap the Cinder Barrens for red, the island, the swamp, and the mountain to play Vestige of Bolas. When Vestige of Bolas enters the battlefield, you may search your library and or graveyard for a card named Nicol Bolas the Deceiver, reveal it, and put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. We will decline to search and play the Vestige of Bolas. We will tap the Vestige of Bolas to add black, and then we will tap the swamp, and we'll play Kenra Eternal, and then Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa will play an island. Nissa will tap everything and play an Angler Drake. It has flying, and when Angler Drake enters the battlefield, you may return target creature to its owner's hand. Will return the Kenra Eternal to its owner's hand. Nicol Bolas picks up the Kenra Eternal. Nissa attacks with the Feral Prowler. Nicol Bolas cannot block and will take 1 and go to 17. Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws. Gets a Wasp of the Bitter End. Nicol Bolas will tap 4 and play Zealot of the God Pharaoh, and then tap for black and play a Wasp of the Bitter End, and then Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a Nissa Genesis Mage. Nissa will play a Forest. Nissa will attack with the Angler Drake. Nicol Bolas declines to block, will take 4 and go to 13. On Nissa's second main, she will tap everything but 1 Woodland Stream and cast Nissa Genesis Mage. It begins with 5 loyalty counters, and Nissa will immediately +2 to 7. Untap up to 2 target creatures, will untap the Angler Drake, and up to 2 target lands will untap the Woodland Stream, and we will untap the Forest. And then Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas will untap. Nicol Bolas will draw. He draws an Aerial Guide. Nicol Bolas will attack Nissa Genesis Mage with the Zealot of the God Pharaoh. In response, Nissa will tap both the Woodland Streams for green and the Forest and flash in a Pouncing Cheetah. Nissa will declare a block, blocking with just the Pouncing Cheetah. They trade. Nicol Bolas loses the Zealot of the God Pharaoh. On Nicol Bolas' second main, Nicol Bolas will cast an Aerial Guide. Having for black, we'll cast a Kenra Eternal, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa draws an Avid Reclaimer. Nissa will tap 2 islands and a forest and play the Avid Reclaimer. Nissa will +2, go to 9, untapping 2 lands, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws 1 card. It is a Manticore Eternal. Nicol Bolas will tap for red, tap all these, and will play the Manticore Eternal, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. She draws another Avid Reclaimer. Nissa will tap a forest and 2 islands, and will play the second Avid Reclaimer. Nissa will +2 to go to 11, and will untap a forest and an island, and then Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas will draw a mountain. Nicol Bolas plays the mountain. Going to attack step, Nicol Bolas will attack Nissa with the Manticore Eternal, and the Wasp of the Bitter End, and the Aerial Guide, and the Kenra Eternal. The Aerial Guide giving Kenra Eternal flying. Nissa will block the Aerial Guide with the Angler Drake, will block the Manticore Eternal with an Avid Reclaimer and a Feral Prowler, and cannot block the other 2 flyers. Nicol Bolas will put the damage on the Avid Reclaimer first and the Feral Prowler. Holding priority, Nissa will tap the Avid Reclaimer for blue mana and will gain 2 life from the ability because she controls her Planeswalker, going to 19. And then damage will happen. Nissa will lose both the Feral Prowler and the Avid Reclaimer. Nissa will also lose 3 life from Manticore Eternal's Afflict, going down to 16. Nissa Genesis Mage will take 4 damage and go down to 7. Nicol Bolas will lose the Manticore Eternal, will lose the Aerial Guide, and then we will go to Nicol Bolas' end step, where Nissa will lose 2 life due to Throne of the God Pharaoh. Nissa loses 2 life and goes to 14, and Nicol Bolas will end his turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a forest. Nissa will hold the forest. Nissa will attack with the Angler Drake for 4. Nicol Bolas cannot block, will take 4 damage and go to 9. Nissa will +2 on herself, untapping the Angler Drake, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a swamp. Nicol Bolas will play the swamp. Nicol Bolas will tap everything and play Nicol Bolas the Deceiver. which enters the battlefield with 5 counters. Nicol Bolas will immediately -3 to go to 2 loyalty to destroy the Angler Drake. Nissa loses the Angler Drake. Nicol Bolas will then attack Nissa Genesis Mage with the Kenra Eternal and the Wasp of the Bitter End. Nissa will block the Kenra Eternal with the Avid Reclaimer, and then will use its ability to add a blue mana and gain 2 life, going up to 16, but will lose 1 life due to the Kenra Eternal's ability going back down to 15. The Avid Reclaimer trades with the Kenra Eternal, and Nissa will take 2 damage to go to 7 loyalty. Nicol Bolas loses the Kenra Eternal, and at the end of Nicol Bolas' end step, Throne of God Pharaoh will trigger, dealing 1 damage to Nissa from the tapped Wasp of the Bitter End. Nissa loses 1 life and goes to 14. And Nicol Bolas will pass turn. Nissa draws. Nissa will play the Forest. Nissa will tap the Forest and 2 islands, and play Spring, searching the library for a basic land, putting the battlefield tapped. We will search for an island. We'll put it on the battlefield tapped. We'll shuffle. Nissa will +2 herself and will untap 2 lands. Nissa will cast Mind from her graveyard, tapping the rest of her mana except for her Woodland Streams, and will exile Spring to Mind and draw 2 cards. And Nissa will pass turn. Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a Supernatural Stamina. Nicol Bolas will attack the Nissa Planeswalker with Wasp of the Bitter End for 2. Genesis Mage takes 2 and goes back to 7. Nicol Bolas will kick himself up by 3 to go back up to 5, and each opponent loses 1 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. Nissa will sacrifice Nissa Genesis Mage. Nicol Bolas will go to his end step and deal 1 damage from Throne of the God Pharaoh. Nissa loses 1 life and goes down to 13. Nicol Bolas ends his turn. Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a Forest. Nissa plays the Forest. Nissa will tap 5 and play Nissa's Encouragement. Search your library for and graveyard for a card named Forest, a card named Bramble-Weft Behemoth, and a card named Nissa Genesis Mage. Reveal those cards, put them in your hand, and shuffle your library. Here's Nissa Genesis Mage. Here's Bramble-Weft Behemoth. Here's Forest. We'll shuffle the library. And Nissa will pass turn. Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas will draw. Nicol Bolas will play Crypt of the Eternals tapped. When it enters the battlefield, will gain 1 life to go back up to 10. Nicol Bolas will tick up Nicol Bolas to 8. Each opponent loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discards a card. Nissa discards a Forest. Nicol Bolas will attack with Wasp of the Bitter End. Nissa takes 2 and goes to 11. Going to Nicol Bolas' end step, Nissa will lose 1 life from Throne of the God Pharaoh. And on the same end step, Nissa will tap the Forest and 2 islands and play a Pouncing Cheetah with Flash. Nicol Bolas will pass turn. Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a Unsummon. Nissa will attack Nicol Bolas' Planeswalker with Pouncing Cheetah. Nicol Bolas cannot block and will take 3 to go to 5. Nissa taps 6 and plays a Bramble-Weft Behemoth, and Nissa will pass turn. Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a Mountain. Nicol Bolas will play the Mountain. Nicol Bolas will -3 the Deceiver to go back down to 2 to destroy their Bramble-Weft Behemoth and draw a card. Draws a island. In response, Nissa will tap an island and cast Unsummon on the Bramble-Weft Behemoth to return it to her hand. Nicol Bolas will pass turn. Nissa untaps. Nissa draws an Unsummon. Nissa will attack Nicol Bolas with the Pouncing Cheetah. Nicol Bolas blocks the attack on the Planeswalker with Wasp of the Bitter End. Nicol Bolas will cast Supernatural Stamina on the Wasp of the Bitter End, giving it +2/+0, and when this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. They will trade. Wasp of the Bitter End will die. Pouncing Cheetah will die. Wasp of the Bitter End returns tapped under Nicol Bolas' control. Nissa will tap 6 and play a Bramble-Weft Behemoth, and Nissa will pass the turn. Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas will draw Nicol Bolas will play an island. Nicol Bolas will tick up Nicol Bolas the Deceiver to 5.
Nissa will discard the Unsummon.
Nicol Bolas will attack Nissa, the player, with Wasp of the Bitter End.
Nissa cannot block, will take 2 to go to 8. Going to Nicol Bolas' end step, Nissa will lose another life from Throne of the God Pharaoh.
Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a Reason to Believe. Nissa will attack Nicol Bolas the Deceiver with the Bramblewolf Behemoth. Nicol Bolas has no response. Nicol Bolas the Deceiver will die. Nissa will tap 7 and play Nissa Genesis Mage. It begins with 5 loyalty counters. She will uptick it by 2 to go to 7 to untap the Bramblewolf Behemoth and an island and a forest. And then Nissa will tap an island to play Reason to scry 3. And Nissa will put all 3 of these on the bottom of her deck. And then Nissa will tap the rest of her mana to cast the Believe half in Aftermath. It says, look at the top card of your library. You may put it on the battlefield if it's a creature. If you don't, put it into your hand. If you look at the top card, it's a forest. It goes into Nissa's hand. And Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws. Nicol Bolas will play Crypt of the Eternals to go to 11. And Nicol Bolas will attack with Wasp of the Bitter End.
Nissa has no response. Will take 2 damage to go to 5. And then on Nicol Bolas' end step, we'll take another to go to 4.
Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa draws an island. Nissa will play the island. Nissa will -3 herself to go to 4 to give the Bramblewolf Behemoth +5/+5 until end of turn, and will attack with the Bramblewolf Behemoth. Nicol Bolas has nothing, will take 11 damage and will perish. And the first game will go to Nissa. We'll be right back for game 2.
For game 2, Nicol Bolas will be on the play. We'll draw 7. Nicol Bolas has all 3 land colors and some spells to play, so Nicol Bolas will keep this hand.
Nissa will draw 7. This has an Aven Reedstalker, an Aven Reedstalker River Hoopa, Ambuscade, Field Prowler, Spring, and Nissa Genesis Mage. There are 0 lands, so we will mulligan this. Draw 6. This has an Unsummoned, Pouncing Cheetah, Reason, Island, Woodland Stream, and Feral Prowler. We will keep this hand, and we will scry. Nissa will leave the island on top.
Turn 1, Nicol Bolas will play a mountain, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa draws. Nissa plays the island. Nissa will tap the island and play Reason. And Nissa will scry 3. Nissa has a Woodland Stream, an Avid Reclaimer, and a Reedstalker. We'll put the Avid Reclaimer on top, and we'll keep everything else in this order. And Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas will draw. Nicol Bolas will play an island. Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa plays a Woodland Stream tapped, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas will play a swamp. Nicol Bolas will tap the swamp, the mountain, and the island, and play Eternal of Harsh Truths that has Afflict 2, and whenever Eternal of Harsh Truth is attacked and isn't blocked, we'll draw a card. Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa will play an island, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws. Nicol Bolas draws a Mana Core Eternal. Nicol Bolas will play a swamp, and Nicol Bolas will attack with the Eternal of Harsh Truths.
Nissa will tap the Woodland Stream for green and the 2 islands, and will play a Pouncing Cheetah.
Before blocks are declared, Nicol Bolas will tap a mountain and play a Magma Spray on the Pouncing Cheetah, dealing it 2 damage and sending it to exile.
The Pouncing Cheetah gets exiled. Nissa takes 1 from the Eternal of Harsh Truths.
Nicol Bolas will draw a card off of its ability, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa will play a Woodland Stream tapped. Nissa will play Avid Reclaimer, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a island. Nicol Bolas will play a mountain, and Nicol Bolas will attack with the Eternal of Harsh Truths.
Nissa will block with the Avid Reclaimer, and will take 2 damage off the Afflict.
On Nicol Bolas' second main, he'll tap everything and play a Manticore Eternal, It has Afflict and Magical Eternal attacks each combat if able, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a island. Nissa will play the island. Nissa will tap an island and a woodland stream for green and will play a feral prowler, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas will draw. Nicol Bolas will play an island. Nicol Bolas will go to attacks and attack with the Eternal of Harsh Truths and the Manticore Eternal. Nissa will double block the Eternal of Harsh Truths with the Feral Prowler and the Avid Reclaimer, and then will tap the Avid Reclaimer for blue mana to cast Unsummon on the Manticore Eternal. She'll lose 2 life from the Afflict of the Eternal of Harsh Truths. Eternal of Harsh Truth dies, and Manticore Eternal is returned to Nicol Bolas' hand. Nicol Bolas will tap out and cast the Manticore Eternal again, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a Zealot of the God Pharaoh. Nicol Bolas will play an island. Nicol Bolas will attack with the Manticore Eternal because it must attack. Nissa will flash in an Avid Reedstalker and will triple block the Manticore Eternal and will lose 3 life from Afflict to go to 12. Nicol Bolas will assign damage to the Avid Reclaimer and the Avid Reedstalker in that order. Nissa loses the Avid Reclaimer and the Avid Reedstalker. Nicol Bolas loses the Manticore Eternal on his second main phase. Nicol Bolas will tap everything and will cast a Zealot of the God Pharaoh and a Marauding Bone Slasher, and then Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws a forest. Nissa will play a forest. Nissa will tap 3 mana and will play a Weaver of the Currents, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas will draw a Wasp of the Bitter End, and Nicol Bolas will attack with the Zealot of the God Pharaoh and the Marauding Bone Slasher. Nissa will double block the Zealot of the God Pharaoh. Nicol Bolas will assign damage first to the Weaver of Currents and then to the Feral Prowler. We'll trade with the Weaver and the Zealot. Nissa loses the Weaver of Currents. On his second main phase, Nicol Bolas will tap everything to play a Zealot of the God Pharaoh and a Wasp of the Bitter End, and then Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa will play another Weaver of Currents, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas will draw a Zealot of the God Pharaoh. Nicol Bolas will go to attacks and will attack with everything. Nissa should be at 9 life from the last attack. Nissa will double block the Zealot of God Pharaoh with the same combo again. Will take 5 damage from the remaining ones to go to 4. Nicol Bolas will assign damage to the Weaver of Currents first, as before. Nissa loses the Weaver of Currents. Nicol Bolas loses the Zealot of the God Pharaoh. Nicol Bolas will go to the second main, tap these 5, and play a Manticore Eternal, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps. Nissa draws. Nissa will play a River Hoopa, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps. Nicol Bolas draws a Cinder Barons. Nicol Bolas will play the Cinder Barons tap. Nicol Bolas will attack with all 3 creatures. Nissa will block the Wasp of the Bitter End with the River Hoopa, the Manticore Eternal with the Feral Prowler. Will take 3 damage from the Marauding Bone Slasher, and will lose 3 life from the Manticore Eternal to lose all of her life and lose the game. Nicol Bolas wins game 2 and will go to game 3.
For game 3, Nissa will opt to go first. We'll draw 7. We have a Forest, a Spring, a Pouncing Cheetah, a Reason, a Bramble Wolf Behemoth, a Nissa Genesis Mage, and an Avid Reclaimer. This cannot be kept, so we'll mulligan. Nissa draws 6. A Woodland Stream, a River Hoopa, an Island, a Bramble Wolf Behemoth, and an Unsummoned. This is not great, but we're going to keep this hand. We'll scry. We will keep the Forest on top.
Nicol Bolas will draw 7. Nicol Bolas has an Island, a Final Reward, a Manticore Eternal, a Marauding Bone Slasher, a Final Reward, and 2 Mountains. This is probably not keepable. We'll mulligan. Nicol Bolas draws 6. A Wasp of the Bitter End, Island, Wasp of the Bitter End, AO Guide, Zealot of the God Pharaoh, and Marauding Bone Slasher. We cannot keep this. We'll go to 5. Draws 5. We have a Burning Fist Minotaur, Manticore Eternal, Island, Nicol Bolas the Deceiver, and a Swamp. This is terrible. We're going to keep this because we can't go to 4. We will scry. We will put Zealot of the God Pharaoh on the bottom.
Nissa will play a Woodland Stream tapped, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas will draw, Nicol Bolas will play a swamp, Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa will untap, Nissa will draw, Nissa will play a forest, Nissa will tap the Woodland Stream for green, the forest for blue, and will play a River Hoopa, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas will draw, Nicol Bolas draws a mountain, Nicol Bolas plays the mountain, Nicol Bolas will tap the swamp and the mountain, play a Burning Fist Minotaur, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps, Nissa draws, Nissa plays an island, Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps, Nicol Bolas draws a supernatural stamina, Nicol Bolas will play an island, and Nicol Bolas will attack with the Burning Fist Minotaur.
Nissa will block with River Hoopa.
Nicol Bolas will cast Supernatural Stamina on the Burning Fist Minotaur, giving it +2/+0, and when this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control.
Nissa taps a blue, and will unsummon the Burning Fist Minotaur.
Burning Fist Minotaur returns to Nicol Bolas' hand, and Nicol Bolas will recast the Burning Fist Minotaur. And Nicol Bolas will end turn.
Nissa untaps, Nissa draws, Nissa plays an island, Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps, Nicol Bolas draws a mountain, Nicol Bolas will play the mountain, Nicol Bolas will attack with the Burning Fist Minotaur.
Nissa will decline to block, take 2, and go to 18.
Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa draws, Nissa will play a forest, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps, Nicol Bolas draws, Nicol Bolas will play a Cinder Barons tapped, and Nicol Bolas will attack with the Burning Fist Minotaur.
Nissa declines to block, and will take 2 damage and lose 2 life.
Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
At the end of Nicol Bolas' turn, Nissa will tap everything, and use River Hoopa's ability to gain 2 life to go back up to 18, and draw a card. Nissa untaps, Nissa draws, Nissa will play a forest, Nissa will tap everything, and will play a Bramble-Weft Behemoth. Nissa will attack with the River Hoopa. Nicol Bolas will take 1 and go to 19, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps, Nicol Bolas draws a Chimera Eternal, Nicol Bolas will tap everything, and cast a Final Reward, exiling the Bramble-Weft Behemoth.
Bramble-Weft Behemoth is exiled.
Nicol Bolas will attack with the Burning Fist Minotaur for 2.
Nissa takes 2 and goes back down to 16.
And Nicol Bolas will pass turn.
Nissa untaps, Nissa draws, Nissa will attack with the River Hoopa. Nicol Bolas cannot block, will take 1 and go to 18. Nissa will tap everything, and will play a Bramble-Weft Behemoth, and Nissa will pass turn.
Nicol Bolas untaps, Nicol Bolas draws, Nicol Bolas will play an island, Nicol Bolas will tap a swamp and a Cinder Barons for red, and will cast a Chimera Eternal, and Nicol Bolas will pass turn. Nissa will untap, Nissa will draw, Nissa will tap everything, will cast the Angler Drake. It has flying. When Angler Drake enters the battlefield, you may return target creature to its owner's hand. Nissa will return the Burning Fist Minotaur to its owner's hand. Nicol Bolas picks up the Burning Fist Minotaur. Nissa will attack with the Bramble-Weft Behemoth and the River Hoopa for 7. Nicol Bolas declines to block, will take 7, go to 11. And Nissa will pass turn. Nicol Bolas untaps, Nicol Bolas draws, Nicol Bolas will tap a mountain and an island, and will play a Burning Fist Minotaur, and Nicol Bolas will pass the turn. Nissa untaps, Nissa draws, Nissa will attack with the Bramble-Weft Behemoth, the Angler Drake, and the River Hoopa for 11. Nicol Bolas will block the Bramble-Weft Behemoth with the Burning Fist Minotaur, and then will tap both reds and both islands and a swamp to discard the Nicol Bolas Deceiver and a Manticore Eternal to give it +4/+0 until end of turn. In response, Nissa will unsummon the Burning Fist Minotaur. Nicol Bolas picks up the Burning Fist Minotaur and will take 11 damage and will perish. Nissa wins third game and wins the match 2 out of 3. Let me know what you thought about the games in the comments below. If you saw any play errors, I think I made a couple, and if I made any rules errors as well, or if you have any suggestions for future such videos, also let me know. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. I'll be back next time with a battle between these two decks and the Face the Hydra Challenge deck from Theros. Until then, this is Refresh.
and thanks for watching.